Picture this. In just 4 years, the Democratic Party didn't just lose an election, they lost 2.1 million registered voters. Meanwhile, Republicans gained 2.4 million. That's a staggering 4.5 million voter swing that represents one of the most dramatic political shifts in modern American history. And here's the kicker. This happened in all 30 states that track party registration. Every single one. The numbers don't lie, and what they're telling us should have every political strategist in America paying attention. This isn't just about one bad election cycle. This is about a fundamental realignment that could reshape American politics for decades to come. What we're looking at today is what Democratic strategists are calling a hidden-in-plain-sight crisis. According to a bombshell New York Times analysis published just this week on August 20th, 2025, the Democratic Party is hemorrhaging voters at an unprecedented rate. This isn't just about people voting differently. This is about Americans literally changing their party registration, walking away from the Democratic brand entirely. And the Trump administration? They're watching this unfold with what can only be described as strategic satisfaction. While Democrats scramble to understand what went wrong, Republicans are capitalizing on what appears to be a massive rejection of Democratic messaging, policies, and leadership. The data comes from L2, a nonpartisan data firm, and it reveals something that should terrify Democratic leaders. Between 2020 and 2024, they didn't just lose ground in a few key states, they lost ground everywhere party registration is tracked. We're talking about Florida, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona, North Carolina, states that were supposed to be the foundation of Democratic electoral strategy. But here's what makes this even more remarkable. The trend isn't slowing down. Since Election Day 2024, approximately 160,000 more Democrats have fled the party, while 200,000 more Americans have registered as Republicans. Let's break down these numbers because they are absolutely staggering. In 2018, Democrats were dominating new registrations. They accounted for 34% of new registrants, while Republicans only had 20%. Fast forward to 2024, and Republicans have completely flipped the script, overtaking Democrats among new registrants for the first time since 2018. But it gets worse for Democrats. Remember how they always talked about their advantage with young voters? Well, that's evaporating faster than morning dew. In 2018, nearly 2/3 of new registrants under 45 who chose a major party were Democrats. By 2024, Republicans held a majority in this group. Think about that. The party that built its future on young voters is now losing them to the GOP. Let's look at some specific states that tell this story. In Pennsylvania, a state that Joe Biden won in 2020, the Democratic registration lead over Republicans dropped from over 500,000 in 2020 to just 53,000 by mid-2025. That's a massive erosion in what's supposed to be a purple state. Florida? Forget about it. The state that was once considered a true swing state has shifted so heavily Republican that Democrats have lost their long-held registration edge entirely. Nevada, Arizona, North Carolina, the same story everywhere you look. The Democratic Party is experiencing one of its worst points in history. We're looking at a 4.5 million voter swing that could take years to recover from, and frankly, we fell asleep at the switch. Now here's where this story gets really interesting from a Trump administration perspective. The voters fleeing the Democratic Party aren't just random people. They're key demographics that Democrats have long relied on. Latino voters, a group Democrats have long considered part of their base, are shifting dramatically. Young men are moving toward Republican registration at rates that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. In 2024, 60% of new male registrants chose the GOP, compared to just 55% of new female registrants choosing Democrats. So what's driving this exodus? The answer isn't complicated, but Democratic leaders seem to be struggling to understand it. Working-class Americans, regardless of their race or ethnicity, are looking at their paychecks, their grocery bills, their gas prices, and they're asking themselves, what exactly have Democrats done for me? When pressed about this crisis, Democratic leaders have struggled to provide compelling answers. The party that once prided itself on being the voice of working Americans now faces accusations of being elitist and out of touch. The numbers don't lie. A Wall Street Journal poll showed 63% of voters had an unfavorable view of Democrats. That's not just losing, that's being rejected by nearly 2/3 of the electorate. We fell asleep at the switch. We underestimated the severity of this registration decline, and now we're facing a crisis that could define the party for years to come. Now, here's where the story gets really interesting from a Trump administration perspective. The voters fleeing the Democratic Party aren't just random people. They're key demographics that Democrats have long relied on. Latino voters, young men are moving toward Republican registration at rates that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. In 2024, 60% of new male registrants chose the GOP, compared to just 55% of new female registrants choosing Democrats. So what's driving this exodus? The answer isn't complicated, but Democratic leaders seem to be struggling to understand it. Working-class Americans, regardless of their race or ethnicity, are looking at their paychecks, their grocery bills, their gas prices, and they're asking themselves, what exactly have Democrats done for me? When pressed about this crisis, Democratic leaders have struggled to provide compelling answers. The party that once prided itself on being the voice of working Americans now faces accusations of being elitist and out of touch. The numbers don't lie. A Wall Street Journal poll showed 63% of voters had an unfavorable view of Democrats. That's not just losing, that's being rejected by nearly 2/3 of the electorate. We fell asleep at the switch. We underestimated the severity of this registration decline, and now we're facing a crisis that could define the party for years to come. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, or should I say the elephant that's winning the room. The Trump administration and Republican operatives aren't just sitting back and watching this happen. They're actively capitalizing on Democratic weakness. What we're seeing is a masterclass in political positioning. While Democrats struggle with messaging and internal divisions, Trump and his team have maintained a consistent narrative that resonates with working-class Americans, that the Democratic Party has abandoned them in favor of cultural issues and elite interests. And here's the thing, the numbers seem to be backing up their claims. Under the Trump administration's policies, we've seen economic indicators that directly impact working families. When people see their 401ks growing and job opportunities expanding, political registration follows economic reality. The Democrats have lost touch with real Americans. While they were focused on woke ideology and identity politics, we were focused on putting America first and bringing jobs back to our communities. The voters see the difference, and they're voting with their feet, right out of the Democratic Party. The Trump approach to this crisis has been typically direct, amplifying the data, highlighting Democratic failures, and positioning Republicans as the party that actually delivers results for working families. It's a strategy that appears to be working, given the massive voter registration shifts we're seeing. So how are Democrats responding to this crisis? New DNC chair Ken Martin has tried to project confidence, saying the party is adapting to a more aggressive stance. In his words, "This isn't your grandfather's Democrat Party, we're bringing a bazooka to a knife fight." But rhetoric aside, the actual response has been telling. Democrats are scrambling to understand what went wrong, with some strategists calling for urgent action to rebuild the party's appeal. The party has announced new technology initiatives, organizing summer campaigns, and various outreach efforts. But here's the question. Is it too little too late? Democratic House members are acknowledging the severity of the crisis. Representative Joe Morrell called it something you can't ignore, but the party's proposed solutions seem to miss the fundamental issue. The problem isn't just tactical, it's structural. Democrats are trying to solve a messaging problem when they may actually have a policy problem. When working-class families look at Democratic policies and see climate initiatives that could cost jobs, immigration positions that seem to prioritize non-citizens over citizens, and cultural stances that feel disconnected from their daily struggles, changing the messaging doesn't address the underlying disconnect. This is a real problem. We're not just losing elections, we're losing the foundation of what makes a political party viable. If people won't even register with us, how can we expect them to vote for us? Let's talk about what this really means for American politics. We're not just looking at short-term electoral consequences. We're looking at a potential fundamental realignment that could reshape the political landscape for decades. When you lose 4.5 million voters in registration alone, that has ripple effects far beyond presidential elections. We're talking about congressional races, state legislatures, governorships, and local elections. The Democratic bench, the farm system that develops future leaders, is being systematically weakened. And here's something that should terrify Democratic strategists. The 2030 census is expected to reduce electoral votes in Democratic-leaning states due to population shifts. So not only are they losing registered voters, they're also losing electoral college representation. For Republicans and the Trump administration, this represents an unprecedented opportunity. States that were once considered purple or even light blue are becoming increasingly red. This isn't just about winning elections, it's about expanding the map of competitive territory. The youth vote, once considered Democrats' ace in the hole, is becoming increasingly unreliable. Gen Z voters are registering as independents at higher rates, and when they do choose a party, more are picking Republican than anyone predicted. So, what does this mean for 2026 and the future of American politics? Traditionally, the party out of power gains ground in midterm elections. But when you're starting from such a weakened position in terms of voter registration, that historical trend might not hold. Democrats are already struggling with fundraising and organizational challenges. When potential voters won't even register with your party, it becomes exponentially harder to build the grassroots infrastructure needed for competitive campaigns. Some analysts are warning that Democrats could face a lost decade if they don't address the fundamental issues driving voters away. But addressing those issues might require admitting that core party positions and messaging strategies have been fundamentally flawed. Meanwhile, the Trump administration continues to build on policies that appear to resonate with the very voters Democrats are losing. Economic nationalism, border security, energy independence — these aren't just campaign slogans anymore, they're governing principles that seem to be attracting voters across traditional demographic lines. The Republican Party infrastructure, strengthened by Trump's influence and these voter registration gains, is becoming more formidable. This isn't just about 2028, this is about building sustainable political dominance for the long term. Here's the bottom line. What we're witnessing isn't just a bad election cycle for Democrats. It's a fundamental rejection of the party brand by millions of Americans. A 4.5 million voter swing in just 4 years represents one of the most dramatic political realignments in modern American history. For the Trump administration and Republicans, this data validates their strategy of focusing on economic nationalism, working-class concerns, and traditional American values. For Democrats, it represents an existential crisis that goes far beyond typical political challenges. The question isn't whether Democrats can recover from this, it's whether they can recover in time to remain competitive in 2026, 2028, and beyond. Based on current trends, that recovery looks increasingly unlikely without fundamental changes to party messaging, policy positions, and leadership approach. The numbers don't lie. And right now, they're telling a story of Democratic decline and Republican ascendancy that could define American politics for the next decade. What do you think is driving this massive exodus from the Democratic Party? Are we witnessing a permanent political realignment, or can Democrats find a way back? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear your analysis of these numbers. And if you found this breakdown valuable, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We're going to keep tracking these political trends and providing you with the data-driven analysis you need to understand what's really happening in American politics. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. What topic would you like to see us cover next? The economic impact of Trump's second-term policies? The changing demographics of American voters? Let us know in the comments, and we'll make it happen.